Some theaters never truly empty. In the darkness between performances, something waits for the next actor to take the stage. The Riverside Theater was supposed to be empty at 11 p.m. on T. Riley had made sure of it, slipping the night janitor $20 for 2 hours of uninterrupted rehearsal space. The audition for the Chekhov revival was in 3 days, and Riley needed somewhere with real acoustics to practice the monologue from Uncle Vanya. The theater felt cavernous in the dark. Only the ghost light stood center stage. That single bare bulb theaters kept burning through the night. Riley flipped on the stage lights, and warmth flooded the playing space. The red velvet seats stretched back into shadow, row after row disappearing into the darkness of the upper balcony. Riley had performed here twice before, in college productions. The space had good bones. Built in 1923, it carried voices beautifully. Every whisper reached the back row. Perfect for an actor who constantly worried about projection, about being heard, about being good enough. Riley set the backpack down stage left and pulled out the script, though the piece had been memorized weeks ago. The monologue was Astrov's speech about the forests, about watching the world die. Dark material, but it showcased range. Kind of piece that could make or break a career. "The forests are disappearing," Riley began, voice finding the rhythm that had been practiced 100 times in the apartment bathroom mirror. "The birds and beasts are fleeing. The rivers are drying up." The words echoed back from the empty seats, crisp and clear. Perfect acoustics. Riley moved through Astrov's mounting desperation, gesturing to invisible trees, mourning a world that humanity was destroying through carelessness and greed. As the speech reached its climax, something made Riley pause. A feeling crawling up the spine like cold fingers, the unmistakable sensation of being watched. Riley squinted out into the audience. Nothing. Just empty seats and shadows. But the feeling persisted, that electric difference between performing for an empty room and a full house. Every actor knew it. Every actor feared losing it. Probably just nerves. Pre-audition jitters, playing tricks. Riley shook it off and tried to recapture the moment. "The rivers are drying up," Riley repeated, but the words felt hollow now. That's when it came. Faint, but unmistakable. The sound of applause. Not loud, not enthusiastic. Just a few people clapping politely, the sound drifting down from somewhere in the darkness above. Riley stopped mid-sentence, straining to listen. Silence. Riley waited, barely breathing. Nothing but the hum of the stage lights and the settling of old wood. "Hello?" The call echoed back, unanswered. The janitor wouldn't return for an hour. The building was locked. Riley had checked twice. Just nerves. Pre-audition anxiety manifesting as phantom sounds. The Riverside had stories. Actors claiming to see figures in the balcony, mysterious applause, the usual theater ghost nonsense. But as Riley prepared to start the monologue again, the certainty remained that somewhere in those darkened seats, someone was waiting, watching, judging the performance that would determine everything. Riley began the monologue again, determined to push through whatever paranoia was creeping in. But something felt different this time. The words came easier, more naturally. The movements felt smoother, more purposeful. "The forests are disappearing," Riley said, and the voice carried a weight it had never possessed before. A resonance that seemed to fill every corner of the theater. Feet moved downstage, toward the audience, though this wasn't part of the blocking. Riley had always stayed center stage, but now something drew the performance forward, as if pulled by invisible strings. The monologue flowed like water. Every gesture felt perfect, every pause precisely timed. This was how Astrov should sound, desperate, prophetic, haunted by visions of ecological collapse. Riley had never performed it better. When it finished, it immediately started again. This wasn't unusual. Repetition was part of rehearsal. But as the words poured out a third time, then a fourth, Riley realized there was no conscious choice to restart. The mouth was moving, the body gesturing, without the mind actively directing them. The theater's acoustics had changed. Riley's voice seemed to bounce differently off the walls, creating harmonics and echoes that transformed the space into something larger, more resonant. It was as if the building itself was amplifying the performance, making it richer and more complex. Riley glanced at the phone. 11:47 p.m. How was that possible? The rehearsal had started at 11:15. Had it really been over 30 minutes? It felt like 5. Riley tried to stop, to take a break, but the body wouldn't obey. Legs carried the performance through movements that had never been choreographed. A slow walk up stage, arms spread wide as if embracing the entire theater. The words kept coming, Astrov's lament about dying forests, but now they felt less like lines from a play and more like a prayer, a ritual incantation. The sensation of being watched had intensified. It pressed from all sides now, not just from the audience but from the wings, from the fly gallery above, from every shadow-filled corner of the theater. Invisible eyes tracked every movement. Riley's voice grew stronger, more commanding. There had never been this kind of vocal power before. Every word rang out clear and true, finding perfect pitch and inflection without effort. It was intoxicating, but underneath the exhilaration, fear began to creep in. This wasn't Riley's performance anymore. Something else was guiding it, shaping the delivery, moving the body through space. Riley was becoming a vessel for someone, or something, else's artistic vision. The monologue ended, and without pause, it began again. 5th time? 6th. Count was lost. Each iteration felt more essential than the last, as if the theater itself required this repetition, this offering of words and movement and emotion. Riley tried to force a stop, to step out of the light, but the muscles wouldn't respond. The voice continued, rich and resonant, filling the space with Astrov's desperate poetry about a world dying by degrees. In the darkness, beyond the stage lights, shapes began to emerge. Shadows that might have been people, sitting in the front rows, watching with rapt attention, waiting for Riley to give them what they needed, what they had always needed. Riley tried to scream, but only Astrov's words came out. The voice was no longer familiar. It carried decades of accumulated performance, layer upon layer of actors who had spoken these same lines on this same stage. The body moved with fluid grace through blocking that had never been learned. Gestures that belonged to long-dead performers flowed through Riley's limbs. This was dancing to choreography written in muscle memory that wasn't Riley's own. The sounds from the audience were unmistakable now. The soft susurrus of fabric as invisible bodies shifted in their seats. Quiet clearing of throats. The held breath of an audience completely entranced. Riley could hear them breathing. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds, filling every seat in the house. Their attention pressed against the performance like a physical weight, hungry and expectant. But when Riley looked out into the theater, only empty seats remained. The wrongness of it made skin crawl, but the performance couldn't stop. The words kept coming, but they weren't Chekhov's words anymore. They were something else entirely. A different monologue. One that had never been heard before. The audience never leaves, Riley's voice said, though the thoughts weren't Riley's. They sit in the dark, waiting for the next performance, waiting for someone to fill the light. Terror shot through Riley's consciousness as the realization hit. This wasn't the audition piece. These weren't the memorized words. Something else was speaking through the performance, using Riley's voice, body, presence on stage. Riley tried to run, tried to break the spell by simply walking away. But the legs wouldn't carry the performance off stage. Instead, they moved in a slow circle, arms outstretched, presenting Riley to every section of the invisible audience. "We've been waiting," the voice continued, and now Riley could hear the others underneath it. Whispers of past performers, their voices layered beneath the current one. So many performances, so many stories told in this sacred space. The applause started again, but louder this time. Enthusiastic. The sound of hundreds of hands clapping in perfect unison, echoing from every corner of the theater. but the seats remained empty. Riley's heart hammered against ribs, but the face maintained perfect stage composure. Years of training had been hijacked, weaponized. All that learning to project confidence and control had made Riley the perfect vessel for whatever presence had taken root in this place. The show must go on, Riley heard the voice say, and the invisible audience murmured approval. It always goes on, in the light, in the dark, with or without witnesses. The voice had become a chorus now. Riley could hear them all, every actor who had ever performed on this stage, their words bleeding through time to speak through this mouth. The boundary between self and performance had dissolved completely. Riley was no longer Riley. The performance was every character ever portrayed in this space, every emotion ever expressed under these lights. Riley had become the collective memory of the theater itself, made flesh and given voice. And in the darkness beyond the stage lights, the audience that shouldn't exist settled back in their seats to enjoy the show. The performance stopped as suddenly as it had begun. Riley found consciousness center stage, arms at sides, staring out into the empty theater. The ghost light hummed behind. The stage lights had been turned off, though there was no memory of switching them. Silence pressed against eardrums like cotton. No applause. No breathing from invisible watchers. Just the settling sounds of an old building and ragged gasps. Riley looked at the phone. 2:17 a.m. 3 hours. 3 hours of performing, and it felt like minutes. Riley grabbed the backpack and ran. Footsteps echoed through the empty theater, stumbling toward the exit, muscle memory guiding through the maze of backstage corridors. Behind, the ghost light stood sentinel, casting long shadows across the abandoned stage. But even pushing through the stage door into the alley, Riley could feel lips moving. Silent words, fragments of dialogue that had never been learned. Hands gestured slightly, unconscious movements that belonged to characters never played. The cool night air should have cleared everything, but the compulsion followed onto the sidewalk. Under a streetlight, Riley caught the reflection mid-gesture, arm extended toward an invisible audience member. The movement felt natural, necessary. Riley forced hands into pockets and walked faster. By the time the apartment building appeared, the unconscious performing had intensified. Riley found pause dramatically at the entrance, timing movements to the rhythm of lines that weren't quite words, weren't quite silence. In the elevator, the reflection in polished metal doors showed someone barely recognizable. The posture was different, more erect, more commanding. The face held an expression of theatrical intensity that felt foreign. Inside the apartment, Riley went straight to the bathroom mirror. The face looking back was familiar, but changed. There was something in the eyes, a depth that hadn't been there before. Or maybe it was emptiness. It was impossible to tell. Riley tried to run through the original monologue, the one that had brought this nightmare into being. "The forests are disappearing," Riley began. The words felt wrong. Clumsy, dead-all, artificial. Riley tried again, reaching for Astrov's desperation, but it was like grasping at smoke. The interpretation that had been crafted over weeks had vanished completely, replaced by something else. Something that belonged to the theater, not to Riley. Riley pulled out the phone and called the acting coach's voicemail. "Hey, Sarah, it's Riley. I need to cancel tomorrow's session. And I think I need to find a different audition piece. This one isn't working anymore." The call ended, and Riley sat on the couch, hands folded carefully. Even this simple position felt like blocking now, as if perpetually on stage, perpetually being watched. Outside the window, the city slept. But Riley remained alert, body held in perfect performance posture, waiting for cues that would never come. In the distance, barely audible over the urban hum, there was applause. Faint, but persistent, like an echo that would never fade. Riley closed eyes and tried to remember what it felt like to simply be Riley, not a performer. But that person seemed as distant and insubstantial as the audience that had watched from empty seats. The show, it seemed, would always go on.